So how do you start? We'll start with you, Doctor. How do you start with a company when they bring you in? What happens?
Well, typically, you have to understand the company. So you go in and you'll do a environmental study. You'll look at what's happening. What are the key business drivers? What are the controllable factors that they can work with and that we can manipulate so that we can improve organizational total performance? And so what we'll do is we'll look at the key business drivers, like what is your leadership styles are like? What is your organizational structure? What is your rewards and recognition system? So you look at the things that drive behavioral patterns, because really what we're talking about is behavioral modification. We want people to behave differently than they have in the past. So the first thing you have to do is to understand where the opportunities are by looking and understanding the company. Once you understand the opportunities, then you can customize an approach that goes in. Sometimes it's software. Sometimes it's consulting. Sometimes it's strategic planning. Other times it's training. And there is no two companies that are the same. They're all different. Even companies that are the same name in different cities have different ones because they have a different manager that's in charge of it. And the personality of the business really reflects the executive that's there and managing that business. And as you change executives, you see the personality in the organization change. So this whole approach of this is right for all companies is wrong. Each company is individual in nature, and their problems are individual.
And now you get involved in training, the executives, the employees, right?
That's right.
You do this individual or is it group?
Basically, what we like to think of it is a waterfall effect. We've got a lot of bad habits in the company. And you start at the top and you wash the bad habits out from the top, and you wash down through until you get down to the employees. It has to be driven by changing the behavioral patterns at the executive team.
It's the management.
Yeah,
where most of the mistakes are, is that right?
The management is responsible for 80% of all the problems that we have.
That much?
AT&T did a study 2 years ago looking at all the problems that they had, and they came up with 92% of them could only be solved by management. And we say, look, we'll train the employees, we'll put them in teams. But the big problem is the way we're managing the company. The average executive I meet with is making someplace between 50 and 80 behavior errors per week. And, and we want our employees to be out there working 1 error every 3 months. So it's almost like we pay people more if they make more errors. And certainly, you look at the cost of the executive errors, and it's far more than it is for that employee that's putting a part together or injecting somebody with a needle.
I'm prompted to ask you, how does one determine how many mistakes an executive makes in a week? How do you find that out?
Well, what we actually do is we establish behavioral requirements. What would you accept as being acceptable behavior? And we establish some ground rules, some measurements. And from that, we actually measure the executive team.
You can figure it out.
And it's very, very straightforward, because you see, you hire an executive not for their behavior, but what the results they can give you.
That's right.
But what drives the organization? What drives the organization is the way the executives behave. Do they react to you? Do they listen to you? And so you've got to change behavioral patterns before you can change culture. Now, you cannot measure the decision-making on a day-to-day basis. You've got to look at that from a long point of time. And so what we did in those cases is we'll go back a year later, and we'll look at all the executive decisions, and we classify them. This was a good decision, this was a perfect decision, and this was a bad decision, those 3 categories. And it's interesting because if you look at the bad decisions, about 10% of the decisions that are made in the executive board is bad. And they're not as bad as you might think, because a bad decision is pretty easy to recognize and correct it.
Yeah.
But you've got 80% of them that are good decisions, but not the best that they could. And only 10% on the other end that are perfect decisions that a year later say, I wouldn't change anything. This is just the right way to do it. And the organizations that are really going to excel in the 21st century is the one that makes more perfect decisions. And there's huge room in the United States to make more perfect decisions.